Hello there, guys, gals, ladies, and gentlemen. My name is Leipaladin, and today we're going to be diving into the topic of boss fights, or assassination missions, in Halo Infinite. Revealed by 343 from a series of in-game screenshots of Infinite's campaign map, it looks as though we'll be dispatching high-value targets within the ranks of the Banished. Unless the game expects us to sit back a few hundred meters away and snipe whoever our targets are in the face, I have a sneaking suspicion that these assassination objectives will act similarly to a boss fight. First introduced in Halo 2, our first ever proper boss fight was with the elite heretic leader, whose main trick was that he had holograms of himself and it was your job to find out which was the real heretic leader and put him down. Overall, it's probably the most interesting boss in this game. Not only does he have a cool and challenging gimmick, but it's also not a very high bar to set. It's so low, in fact, you're likely going to trip over it. Following on from that, we had the Prophet of Regret, which, as Marty O'Donnell so eloquently put it,
Prophet of Regret, you beat an old man up in a wheelchair, are you kidding me?
And didn't have a lot of depth to it. Most of the challenge came from the infinitely spawning Honor Guard elites rather than the Prophet himself. And in the final mission of the game, we got Tartarus, who was basically a walking vulnerability period. In Halo 3, we got 343 Guilty Spark, who didn't pose much of a challenge and was more about giving the player the chance to kill Spark themselves, as opposed to being robbed of that opportunity and seeing it happen in a cutscene. Halo 5. And speaking of that game, we didn't get another boss fight till Halo 5 in the form of the Warden Eternal, who was an eternal pain in my ass whenever he decided to rear his ugly looking head. He's bullet spongy, he's overused, his weak point is difficult to get to, he's easy to cheese, I can't explain how much I hate this guy. So, suffice to say, Halo's history of conventional boss fights has been a bit of a swing and a miss. However, there is one type of boss that has actually worked well within Halo's sandbox, which is the Scarab from Halo 3, not the hand basket looking moving set piece from Halo 2, not that one, the Scarab from Halo 3. The Scarab in this game acts as a sandbox and combat puzzle. You're given multiple different ways to approach the destruction of the Scarab, whether that's by shooting out its legs with a vehicle or high damage weaponry, waiting for it to collapse and so you can get on board to blow up its core. You can find a high vantage point and just drop in on it. You can hang back and try to destroy its armor and maybe get a shot on the core from where you are. There's plenty of different ways to take it on. Those are just a few examples. And that's kind of what made it so good, is that it rewarded you for your problem solving and your knowledge of the sandbox and how it worked. So, taking what worked so well about Halo 3's Scarab and the level of problem solving involved in that, I wrote down a number of different rules that I'll have to follow when coming up with these potential boss fights in Halo Infinite. So, rule number 1. No bullet sponges. It might work for some games, but not for Halo, especially considering Halo's reputation as the, quote, smart FPS game, unquote. No brain dead shooting at the boss till it keels over and dies uneventfully. You have to use your head to beat this thing, and it has to use many aspects of the sandbox. It can be weapons, equipment, or even vehicles. Rule number 2, these boss fights have to fit within the established lore and continuity of Halo and can't go completely off the rails. They also need to feel fair. No Resident Evil-esque transformations that come out of nowhere and give the boss a second health bar. Rule number 3, each fight should be unique from the last. Copy-paste boss fights like we saw in Halo 5 are one of, if not the worst thing a developer can do to pad out the runtime of their game. And rule number 4, I'll have to devise a boss for a leader within each species that we know of being in the Banished. So Jackals, Grunts, Elites, and Brutes, of course. I wasn't too sure if the drones were in the game or not, so I kind of left them out, and also they're kind of annoying anyway. I'd prefer to just forget about them. But these boss fights should also take on the characteristics and known traits for each of these species. For an example, the Elites being swift, deadly, honorable, master swordsmen, the Brutes being focused around gravity-centric weaponry, or Hunters being big, tanky with a lot of health. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The Jackals are a unique species in Halo, which is why I've chosen to start with them, as unlike their Grunt counterparts who share a similar role of being frontline disposable cannon fodder, the Jackals can also occupy the role of long-range support, choosing to hang back with a sniper rifle and pick you off from a distance. In Halo's lore, they're also incredibly bloodthirsty, savage, and opportunistic in their nature. They're known for eating their human prisoners or chasing them down like attack dogs. They have a sect of pirates within their race who pillage other ships and planets, and this self-indulgent streak that's motivated by acquiring more wealth talks to their role within the Banished as mercenaries for hire. The Jackals are also incredibly brittle and weak as a species, their bones being hollow, and as such a quick hit from the buttstock of an assault rifle would be more than enough to cause irreversible and potentially fatal damage. All of this meaning that a boss fight with a Jackal would be tricky. Instead of facing you head-on like many other species within the Banished or the Covenant might try to do, the Jackals I feel like would be more inclined to hang back and weaken you from a distance and play to their strengths of quick movement, agility, accuracy, and their naturally gifted senses of smell and sight. One of the biggest things to take into consideration when setting up these boss fights is the arena in which they take place in, and for the Jackals, I'd imagine a woodland or forested area with low visibility, potentially at nighttime, and with high vantage points would be ideal for them. These Jackals have an encampment within this tree line, and have had more than enough time to prepare for the arrival of Master Chief. Playing to their nature as hunters, the Jackals set traps and other defenses for you to fight through before you can get to their leader, all the while wearing you down with a barrage of sniper fire. The Jackals would use their speed and agility to reposition between shots, jumping from tree to tree. Their giveaway, however, would be the bright glint of their eyepiece. Whenever a Jackal is preparing to take a shot and is scoped in, there's a small window of time where you can see the bright light emitting from their heads, so you can roughly guess where they are and hit them with a quick burst from your ranged weapon. Alternatively, you can use your equipment, stand out in the open and give the Jackals a clear shot at you, only to block it with your repulsor. Then you can memorize where those shots came from and quickly follow up with a few of your own. You can use the grapple shot to reach the treetops and take the fight to their level, shoot a threat sensor into the tree canopy to show where they are, or throw down a drop wall and shoot them through it to take them out. There should be multiple ways to approach this confrontation, with no one way being the perfect answer. The leader of these Jackals, I'd imagine, would be the best of both types of Jackal unit, incorporating a long-ranged weapon like a beefed-up version of the beam, focus, or stalker rifle, along with a shield that's attached to his weapon, making it difficult to hit a headshot on him while he's firing at you. This Jackal leader would be fast and almost impossible to keep up with, so fighting him from a distance would at first be your best means of offense. However, you can wear his shield down with plasma weaponry and maybe go in for a few shots with a bullet-based weapon to cause some damage to his health. The gun shield will also leave his legs vulnerable, a bit like Captain America, so if you can get the angle and get a few shots off on his legs, this would drastically slow his movement and damage the armor around his legs and allow you to catch up with him and finish off that pesky Jackal for good. The underlings of the Covenant, and subsequently the Banished as well, the Grunts are the weakest unit in any Halo game, normally only requiring one headshot to kill or a few quick melees. They have no energy shields, normally no fancy weaponry, and are small, stubby, and thus move slowly. Their biggest weakness, however, is their methane tanks. Grunts can't breathe oxygen, so they require a tank of methane to breathe and normally die after a short while if they're without it. Grunts on their own aren't particularly imposing, however they can be quick to overwhelm you in larger numbers, and their devotion goes much deeper than just their word, willing to sacrifice themselves at the drop of a hat and charge at players with plasma grenades primed if their leaders die in combat. This makes the Grunts an interesting species to build a boss around, as they don't have any definable traits aside from being, well, small.
Only shot it once! I shot lots of times, killed many enemies!
I think the best reference to base this fight off of would be the Grunt mech or Goblin first seen in Halo 5's Warzone mode and later in Halo Wars 2. I'd make a few changes, however. Not only would this Grunt Goblin be incredibly tanky and practically immune to conventional weapon fire, like the Scarab, he would have certain weak points that you would need to hit before being able to do some serious damage. The Grunt's reliability on breathing methane would play a huge part in this boss fight, and as such, it would be up to you to damage the cockpit that the Grunt sees out of. Breaking the glass on it would expose the Grunt inside to the oxygen atmosphere and thus slowly kill him. His armory would consist of a strong area of effect melee attack that would damage you heavily if you got too close to him and knock you back, along with a massive needler cannon arm that shoots rapidly but takes a while to reload. To damage this Grunt Goblin, you first need to break his shields. This would require you to do a lot of damage to him, either with a bullet-based weapon, or you can speed this process up by ditching your trusty assault rifle for a plasma-based weapon, which will drain his shields faster. Then you can shoot him at one of his 6 weak points, either of his legs or arms or the 2 methane canisters that protrude from the back of the goblin mech. Once you've dealt enough damage to him, the goblin will run to cover, and a small army of grunt cannon fodder will come charging at you aggressively with weapons ranging from the standard plasma pistols to Furod cannons, and even try to rush you with plasma grenades or splatter you with ghosts, all in the vain hope of stopping you from defeating their generous and glorious leader, Yap Yap the Destroyer. Depending on the area on the mech that you do damage to, a certain part of the goblin will stop working. Shoot his legs or the canisters on his back, and he'll move and strafe slower, though will be more likely to use his needler cannon and attack you from range. Shoot his arm with the needler cannon, and his ranged attack won't work anymore, but he will be more likely to rush you with melee attacks. Either way, this gives you the chance to board the goblin, either in a more conventional sense like a vehicle by pressing your interact button, or by using your grapple shot to get on board and therefore crack the egg inside, punching down on the glass dome cockpit and exposing Yap Yap to the elements outside. Once the highest ranking combatant race within the Covenant, the elites are the backbone of Halo's combat loop and appear in Halo Infinite to look like a return to the series' roots. Instead of being large and brutish like they were in Halos 4 and 5, they seem to have lost a bit of weight, slimmed down, and look to be the swift, honourable, and deadly warriors that we all remember them being in Halos Combat Evolved 2 and Reach. The elites took on a variety of different roles within the enemy sandbox: miners, mages, ultras, zealots, etc., though one of the rarest ranks was the Spec Ops. Seen only a few times within Halo's campaigns, the Spec Ops elites are arguably the most interesting of the various elite ranks and are known for using active camouflage to their advantage, stalking their prey and waiting for the perfect time to strike. We know that Halo Infinite will include members of the Silent Shadow, a group of elite elites who... Did I seriously just write a group of elite elites? How tired was I when I came up with this script? Holy shit. A group of elite swordsmen, known for their blood-red energy swords and were just about the only group within the Covenant who could deal with Spartans easily. These are unlike any group of elites we've fought against. The Zealots from Halo Reach? Pushovers compared to these guys. The only enemy that I think could even come close is a Jackal sniper, and even then, I think they'd have a tough time keeping their eyes on them. So, I think that for this hypothetical boss fight, we should look at a member of the Silent Shadow who is already confirmed to be in the game, Jega Rdomnai. A victim of an ambush gone wrong, or potentially an experiment that was an affront to Sangheili beliefs, Jega is honestly just built different. Unlike the many elites who have come before him, Jega has a prosthetic limb that looks almost human in its design, which makes you question how he got it, along with the recognizable red energy sword seen by many within the ranks of the Silent Shadow, and a shorter energy wrist guard that no doubt is just as deadly as his sword. Thinking of a region to have this fight take place in, I think it needs to be tight, close quarters, and somewhere dark to make the most of his energy sword. In the rare moments that you do see that red glow, it should strike you with fear. I'm going to take a page from the Halo 2 mission Regret and have this fight take place somewhere deep in the bowels of a Forerunner hydro facility. And why underwater, you may ask? Well, you're about to find out. Jaeger's main attack is to rush the player with his energy sword, charging at you with quick, precise strikes that will kill you almost immediately. However, they are telegraphed. While active camo can hide your person, it can't hide the sounds you make. During the fight, Jaeger taunts you from different corners of the facility, hiding in the shadows and distracting you before he charges towards you. You can hear his footsteps in the direction they're approaching from, along with the mechanical whirring of his robotic arm, winding up to deliver the next killing blow. You can spray and pray, hoping to land a few shots on him to temporarily break his camo, or you can attempt to outrun and dodge him. However, the darkness of this hydro facility makes it almost impossible for you to see him coming. The other best way to know when he's charging towards you? A little bit of property damage. Shooting pipes within this hydro facility and breaking parts of the ceiling will begin to flood the room you and Jaeger are fighting in. Much like the segments with camouflaged elites and grunts and regret, you'll not only be able to hear the direction in which Jaeger is approaching more clearly through the slosh of the water, but it'll also give you a clear indication of where he is through the ripples too. Damaging him will cause his camouflage to break, leaving him open to conventional attack with weapons. His shields are strong but can eventually go down, which is where you can make your move to finish him with conventional weaponry, or take him on 1v1 with an energy sword the honorable way. No doubt an elite of his caliber would be more than happy to test the skills of a demon like Master Chief. The Hunters are, in some ways, Halo's first unofficial attempt at a boss-like fight. Heavily armored and almost impossible to kill with conventional weaponry.
So that was a fucking lie.
The Hunters have the unique ability among every other race in the Covenant in that they are formed by a colony of small worms called the Letgolo, all acting under one collective consciousness. The Hunters, Locust, and Scarab are all variants of these Letgolo worms forming together and being fastened into a suit of heavy armor. One of the only things that I enjoyed about the limited series Halo Nightfall was the show's depiction of the Letgolo worms, and in particular, their ability to shapeshift and change depending on the circumstances. I know I said no Resident Evil-esque transformations, but honestly, I think this is too good of an opportunity not to give this type of boss a try and genuinely freak the player out, subverting their expectations. So, for a Hunter boss, I think it'd be interesting to have these Letgolo worms start off strong, maybe in the form of a unique vehicle like the Locust, because Lord knows we need to give the Halo Wars vehicles some love, which is kind of like a smaller scale version of the Scarab from Halo 3. Similar to Halo 3, you use a vehicle like a Scorpion tank to destroy the legs of the Locust, potentially climb aboard, destroy its core, step back, and watch the fireworks. You think you've saved the day. Master Chief blowing shit up and not looking at the explosions because he's a cool guy. But this time, something ain't right. Almost like a scene straight out of Terminator 2 or the ending of Spider-Man 3 with Venom, these little bits of the Letgolo worms start forming back together, grabbing the remaining pieces of vehicular debris scattered across the landscape to form plates of armor for its next form, the Goliath. Right away, your vehicle is no longer suitable for a fight like this. The Goliath rushes your tank, crushing it, pounding it, and tossing it around like a ragdoll. You jump out and realize that now it's a boots on the ground fight. You versus whatever the actual that massive thing is. The easiest way to defeat this boss, similar to a Grunt Goblin, is to aim for its weak spots, the cracks in the armor where the Letgolo worms are exposed, and, of course, the most damage is dealt in the back. For veteran Halo players, this is going to feel like slipping on an old pair of shoes. It's going to be like a classic Hunter fight, but on roids. The Goliath will come charging your way, and it'll be up to you to dodge its attacks by grappling out of the way with a grapple shot or sprinting away in hopes of outrunning it, all the while dealing more damage to its weak spots. Concentrate your fire on its arm or a leg, and it'll eventually disconnect from the rest of the body, and the Goliath will shrink down in size to compensate, gradually getting weaker and weaker till it's the size of an ordinary Hunter, and past that, a small squirming mound of worms that you can finish off with a quick crush from your boot. This then brings us to the Brutes, the head honchos of the banished ranks who, like their name suggests, are brutal in their tactics and, unlike elites, have very little in the way of honorable rules when it comes to their battles with others. The Brutes are likely to have multiple boss fights attached to their race, as so far we know of Escharum, Hyperius, and Tavares, who will all likely be boss fights within Infinite's campaign at some point, though for the sake of keeping this video to a decent length, I'm gonna focus on Escharum. The equipment and weaponry of the Brutes is utilitarian, sometimes bordering on dangerous to the user in their levels of overkill. Look no further than banished weapons like the Ravager, which leak liquid hot plasma, or the banished Scarab, a unit that literally drops liquid hot plasma onto the ground below. They have a thing for liquid hot plasma. Or their many vehicles and weapons that seem to be stitched together from Covenant, Forerunner, UNSC, and Lord knows what other types of tech. Their main weapon of choice, however, is the gravity hammer, so leaning into the idea of Brutes using gravity-based weaponry, I think it'd be cool to see Escherum's gravity hammer be like a buffed-up version of the Fist of Rukt, used by Tartarus in Halo 2, though due to its incredible power, like many banished pieces of weaponry, it's unstable, dangerous even. Also, to take a page from another fictional monkey in video games, Donkey Kong, I think it'd be a cool reference to see Escharum using the hammer to pick up objects and fling them at the player at high speed, similar to the gravity gun from Half-Life 2. After dodging the many crates and other objects thrown at you by Escharum, the moment you get too close, he slams his hammer down, blasting you back and sending all items in the nearby area floating. Crates, vehicles, fusion coils, you name it. To get closer to Escharum, you'll have to hope that you've become accustomed to your trusty grapple shot throughout the course of the game, as you'll need it to grapple onto nearby objects to close the gap between you and him. However, the hammer, much like the Fist of Rukt in Halo 2, grants the user with a strong shield that takes a lot of damage before being able to be destroyed. A surefire way to damage his shield and leave him vulnerable to attack is by concentrating your fire on his hammer, thus damaging it. Once his hammer takes enough damage from conventional weaponry, his shields will drop, normal gravity will resume, and you can go ham on him. My suggestion, grapple some nearby fusion coils and toss them his way, or take the risk to get in close and get some melee hits in before he blasts you back with his hammer and continues to throw objects at you occasionally, even tossing his subordinates like grunts. As the fight goes on, the speed in which he throws objects at you will increase, though throughout the course of the fight, you'll be able to shoot his hammer again, giving you a short period to do damage to his health. On the final phase of the boss fight, his hammer will malfunction to the point of no return. The internal power supply slowly collapsing in on itself, bringing in all nearby objects with its gravitational pull. Escharum is bombarded with floating crates, vehicles, and blasted with fusion coils, all flying towards his hammer, collapsing in on him until he is buried and crushed under the immense pressure from this gravitational pull, killing him in the process. A grisly end for a similarly grisly opponent. I like to think that Chief has an interesting relationship with gravity, whether he's flying bombs into Covenant cruisers or jumping out of Forerunner key ships and somehow sticking the landing, or in the case of Infinite, starting the campaign in the gravity-devoid vacuum of space where he has to move through the wreckages of destroyed ships in low gravity as well. I find it kind of poetic that Chief ends the game fighting against the forces of gravity, similarly to how it started. So, those were some of my ideas of what I'd personally like to see as the basis for some of the boss fights in Halo Infinite. No doubt there will be more going on than the ones I mentioned, but I think boss fights are probably one of the things I'm most excited to see in-game when Infinite rolls around in early December. I'm keen to see if 343 have learnt from their past mistakes of Halo 5 and also Bungie's endeavours. What type of boss fight would you like to see in Halo Infinite? Do you think the game even needs them? Let me know in the comments below. I'm always down for a discussion. Please feel free to drop a like and a subscription as it keeps me motivated to continue making these weekly videos. And if you're feeling extra generous, why not chuck a follow on Twitch? Links in the description. You wouldn't. You're way scared.